Let's get ready to rumble. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to JK Sports 7. I'm Kevin. This is Joel, and we are going to do the long awaited joint mock draft where he and I duel to see which one of us would be a better NFL GM. The spoiler alert is neither of us will be good at this, but we hope to give you guys a lot of laughs along the way. Joel, you want to take it away?
Hey man, we have I think two teams having their teenage kids being GMs now. The Raiders and the was it the Giant Jets?
Yeah,
Their
Giants.
kids are
Yeah.
running
Or I guess the
the
Jets too.
team.
Yeah.
So I mean, why can't we? But let's hop into here. So how we're gonna have this set up is Kevin is gonna go ahead and take the even teams, and I'm taking the odds teams. Yes, we kind of did this so I can draft the Steelers and Kevin can draft the Broncos. That was part of
Surprise,
the reason we did
surprise.
it. But I think it's be fun to go back and forth. We may have a few trades, a few surprises. We've seen both of our individual mock drafts. Now we'll kind of put them together and see what comes out. So again, just fun to kind of see what could happen. So I'm gonna start with the Titans. I don't think this is going to be a surprise tonight or on draft night. They need a quarterback. They don't love Will Levis. They need a change there. The coach wants his guy there. He didn't draft Levis. Let him get his guy to build his team. And they get Cam Ward, the number one ranked quarterback in the draft. Start turning that team around. You start the quarterback and go from there. Kevin, you got the Browns next.
Yeah. Can't argue with your pick at all. I know you and I have talked for a long time about how my conspiracy theory was the Giants were going to make moves to move up to number one and do exactly what just happened. But I think the Titans have backed off of those talks because they've just fallen in love with Ward. So just like you said, I think they're just going to not overthink it. Uh, the Browns, however, so I know what I want them to do, but what I want them to do and what I think they will do are completely opposite from each other. Obviously, this week, I don't know if you saw this, but Joe Flacco is once again signed by the Cleveland Browns. It looks as if they're kind of padding their quarterback room. And I feel like if they wanted to go quarterback with the number 2 overall pick, they wouldn't have the need to pad their quarterback room because they know they're going to get one of the top 2 guys. That tells me that they actually don't see enough out of these 2 guys here to warrant making a pick as far as quarterback goes. So I think what they're going to do with the number 2 overall pick, and it's going to be controversial. I think everybody's going to talk about it for, months, really, even into the season. I think they have fallen in love with a certain wide receiver slash cornerback during the draft visits and at the combine. Um, the amount of Browns brass that were from what I was reading a report at CU's Pro Day, when Travis Hunter only did wide receiver drills, and he didn't do the wide receiver drills with gloves because he, quote, wanted them to hear the pop when the ball hit his hands so they knew how good his hands were as a wide receiver, kind of making a statement there. I think the Browns go for it, whether they pair him with Jerry Jeudy at the offensive position, whether they put him with Denzel Ward on the secondary, maybe both. The Browns take Travis Hunter out of Colorado University with the second overall pick in the draft.
I wasn't expecting you to go there. You've mocked Abdul Carter there quite a bit, so I was surprised that you took Travis Hunter there. Um, can I push the Giants in a tough spot? You have Abdul Carter on the board still, who is probably projected as the number one player in the draft. However, you already have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau as your rushers. So it kind of leaves him in a tough spot. I think they ideally want Travis Hunter. I don't think they go quarterback either. I think you got two guys there with Winston and Russell Wilson. I don't think you had a third guy, especially a guy with the I don't want to call it baggage, just the stuff around him, like a Shadur Sanders in New York. Because if anything goes wrong, Russell has a bad game, the fans are gonna be, chanting Sanders, Sanders, and Sanders.
Right.
I don't think if you're Brian Daboll, who coaching for your job, really, you want a quarterback change in the middle of the year. I don't think not something you want to bring in, have a quarterback controversy on your last year of a deal who you may get fired for. So it puts them in a tough spot on where to go for this pick. So I think they look away from those two positions, and I think they're going to go on the offensive line. I think that's tough though.
Hmm.
You threw me off with taking Travis Hunter number 2. You really did.
Listen, I don't like it. I don't think the Browns should do that. I think they got to go quarterback. I've been very adamant about that. However, I think he made a great impression with a lot of the top teams, including the Giants, and I think the Browns, with them signing Joe Flacco literally this week, that just tells me they're pivoting and they're going to go with someone electric, and then they'll get a draft a draft pick as far as quarterback goes, like in the later rounds, or wait till next year. So
So I think with the Giants in there, I think they're going to go offensive line. I think they go more
hmm,
that prototypical offensive lineman. There's been some controversy with Will Campbell about his arm length. Is he going to be more of a guard in the NFL? Is he going to stay a tackle? I think they want to get that solid right tackle to replace Evan Neal, who really hasn't been the player they want him to be. And I think they get Armand Membu as the starting right
hmm.
tackle to plug and play there, help create some solidify the offensive line, help their quarterback stand upright, give more options there, help the running game as well.
All right. Huh. All right. Well, was not expecting you to do that. So, um, in my opinion, uh, Vrabel has tripped twice trying to run his pick over to the commissioner as fast as he possibly could when he saw that nobody took Abdul Carter in the first 3 picks. In fact, I'm hearing reports that Vrabel has now sprained both ankles trying to pick himself up and tripped a third time with how excited he was because he couldn't believe it. You have Vrabel with the Patriots trying to reestablish or reinvent the Patriot way, and you're looking at potentially the number one overall prospect in the draft sitting there, right there for the taking. Patriots don't blink. They take Abdul Carter Edge out of Penn State with the 4th overall pick.
Yeah, I agree. The Patriots would be ecstatic if this falls the way it does, and it's very likely to fall this way. Realistically, in some way, I think they end up with like Abdul Carter. I think it's very realistic they kind of get there. I'm calling this the most boring pick in the draft.
All right.
Every mock draft I've seen, the same player gets mocked here. In all my mock drafts, the same player gets mocked here. Um, I just can't get around it. But let's make it interesting.
Oh,
I'm gonna mix up a little bit. I'm gonna have a slight trade here, and I'm gonna have the Jets trade with the Jaguars. So a short little trade up and swap picks with the Jaguars. So we'll push that through here. So the Jaguars trade with the Jets. And again, these aren't going to be realistic trades here. We're just going to push it through here to make it happen. Right there. Okay, it's going to reject it. Try to make it easy and just let me do it. Let's see, Jets.
was it Ricky Williams back in the day who they traded an entire year's worth of draft picks to move up and draft him?
Yes, the Jets are going to draft Ricky Williams.
No, I just mean like they're just gonna go all. Yep, all there it is. All their draft picks.
So with this
Jets move
pick,
up.
I think they're trying to get ahead of the Raiders, and not for the play you think they're going to go after. I think they make a play for Shadur Sanders here. I don't think they view Justin Fields as a super long-term option. I don't think you should.
Wow.
I don't think he's the guy for the future to bring you along. I think at the very least, you make competition. I believe Fields on a 2-year deal. The most of the money, it's like 30 million guaranteed, so 20 this year. So this year's fully guaranteed, and next year's like 10 million. So it's not a huge dead cap space if you let him go or keep him as your backup. But I think you bring Shadur in to create more competition for them right there. I think Fields can, he has the most illustrious career, but I think he can help Shadur a little bit what NFL's like and go there. So make it a little interesting here. The Jets are going to take Shadur Sanders at number
Wow.
5.
All right. I need to make
Throw a
some
little
notes.
wrench in there, make it a little more difficult.
All right. Wow. All right. So you know what though? I think that would be I think that'd be a really good pick for New York. I think, it'd be kind of ironic that everybody thought Shadur was going to go to MetLife Stadium just with the blue and the red instead of the white and the green. So,
Mm,
all right, Shadur Sanders. Okay. So, that takes us to the Raiders. So, with the Raiders, I've kind of been going back and forth on what I think they're going to do. Um, I know a lot of mocks have them taking Ashton Genty here, but I think that there's a lot of different ways the Raiders could go. Obviously, they missed Josh Jacobs when he left and went to Green Bay. I think with them getting Geno Smith and giving him the deal that they did, I think the Raiders are definitely looking for what can we do to kind of like add to our offense. Like obviously Brock Bowers is there. I think they have a lot of needs everywhere. But, looking at the board, looking at who's fallen, you got to wonder, do they maybe start to overthink things a little bit, right? Obviously, Travis Hunter's gone. You've got Carter gone. Sanders is gone. So, top 2 quarterbacks off the board. Do they stick with Genty? Do they maybe look at the defensive side of the ball and say, hey, we have the division where there's Patrick Mahomes, there's Justin Herbert, there's Bo Nix. Like, do they really go offense or do they do defense? And the one thing about Pete Carroll that I know is yes, he had beast mode in Marshawn Lynch out in Seattle, but he also had the Legion of Boom. He also had a defense that, if you remember, I know I do, I know all of Denver does, in 2013 season, they destroyed the Broncos in the Super Bowl based off of their defense. And I think personally, the fact that you've got, in my opinion, somebody on the defensive line who, in a lot of mock drafts I've seen, is already gone by now. I see this guy as someone who's always gone to the Jaguars at the 5th overall pick. But with you doing this trade, I think it actually opens it up for discussion. And I think the Raiders, they look at it and say, is Ashton Genty amazing? Absolutely. Does this draft happen to have 10, 12 excellent running backs that can fit a lot of different schemes? Yes. And I think they look at a certain Mason Graham and they envision a front 4 that they can pair with their boy Max Crosby that they just re-signed. And I think they say, yep, they'll be able to get after Patrick Mahomes like the Eagles did in the Super Bowl. They'll get after Justin Herbert, Bo Nix. They want to go ahead and recreate that nasty. And they actually go with Pete Carroll's first pick, Mason Graham out of Michigan, to try to give that, that defensive trench just like a lot of nasty.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that helps solidify that defensive line. Oop, we had a mistake there, so that's fine. But
Oh,
yeah,
what happened?
I think that I clicked 2 buttons there, so it's all right. So the Jaguars take tackle, which is fine. They need a tackle, so
Were
I
you
was leaning that way anyways. So
you were leaning
I
that
went
way?
there. But
Okay.
kind of going back to your, yeah, I think tackle makes a lot of sense from them. So yeah, that makes a great pick. But going back to the
Well,
Raiders, I think the only problem with Mason Graham is they have Christian Wilkins there. So how are those two play together with Max Crosby and Malcolm Kuntz on the edge? It could be a crowded D line, but I think that you take talent. I think that's what
Well,
Carroll
what I
and
was
Tom Brady are going to influence. Like, get good players when you can.
right. Well, and I was also thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't see, and I could be remembering this wrong. I seem to have blotted the end of the 2013 season from memory because, as a Broncos fan, that was a hard day for us all. Didn't the Seahawks at that time run a 4-3? I feel like they did. I could be completely wrong. I could be remembering it incorrectly, but I feel like with Brady and Carroll, they take the best
You had Bobby
overall.
Wagner and you had Bruce Irving and stuff like that.
But you had Bennett on the edge, and I cannot remember if they were 3-4 or 4-3. In my head, I feel like they were 4-3. I could be completely wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it gives them flexibility. You can like move a couple pieces around on that defensive line, or I don't know if Pete Carroll's gonna be 4-3 or 3-4. I don't know if he's. I mean, have you seen anything about what kind of scheme they're gonna run there, or no?
So the Raiders are currently running a 4-3 with
Okay,
Kuntz and. So I know the Raiders are currently running a 4-3 with Crosby and Kuntz on the end, and because Max Crosby is not really big enough to be a 3-4 D end, he's a little bit smaller for that. So a 4-3 makes sense to keep him in his more natural position. He had to pack on some weight to become a 3-4 D end. So yeah, I think because they have Christian Wilkins, but they have Jonah Lalu at defensive tackle. So I think Mason Graham could slide there as your second D tackle.
yeah. And then
So
obviously going to your Jaguars
the
pick
Jaguars
though.
grab tackle. Yep, they need tackle. I think I would love to get them Mason Graham with the trade back. I think they get extra capital. They need players in general. I think a lot of way, but I think you got to build offense. You got to build offensive line. Help Trevor Lawrence out. You guys paid him a bunch of money. You are committed to Trevor Lawrence for the future. Like, you can't get rid of him. You have to keep him upright and keep him protected. And what about other things later on? Will Campbell still there? You got to take the best offensive lineman still there. So I like that pick a lot. So back to you with the Panthers.
So the Panthers, there's a couple different ways I think they could go. I know that like they have a lot of needs everywhere. Young team, obviously, I think they do stick with Bryce Young. Obviously, I think Bryce Young is at this point in the draft with the top two guys off the board. I think Bryce Young is possibly better than anybody left in the draft already, and we're just 8 picks in as far as the quarterback position goes. So I don't think they're. I think they were happy enough with what they saw at the end of the year last year to where they wouldn't look that way anyway. But especially from a talent perspective, I think they're looking at it like, what can we do to build around him, right? And they could use a wide receiver here. I think actually like a sneaky pick could be Ashton Genty here. Like, what do you do for a young quarterback? You give him a really solid running game, but they have Chuba Hubbard there still, don't they? I feel like they still have Chuba Hubbard there.
They just re-signed him to a pretty big
Okay.
contract this year too.
Okay. So while they could do a lot for their young quarterback, I also think in the same way a good running game and good weapons around a quarterback helps. I actually think having a good defense helps a quarterback because it allows them to make mistakes, right? And if they know they've
Evan,
got a
would you
great
consider a
defense,
trade here from somebody trying to trade up for Ashton Genty, like the Cowboys or even the Bears moving up to get Genty
um,
here?
no, because I think that with them re-signing Chuba Hubbard, like you just said, I don't think a lot of teams will consider the Panthers as a team that could riskily take Ashton Genty. I don't think anybody would be looking at that. And then with the Saints next on the board with Kamara there, I think if we're going to look at trades for Genty, I think the first team that comes up, in my opinion, they're in the the 10, 11, and 12 range where the Bears and the Cowboys are. So I don't think there would be a trade at this spot. And
You
I
would see
think
the
that
Cowboys trying to trade up, trying to get ahead of the Bears to get Genty?
if I could see them doing that with the Saints
Mm.
potentially, just because the Saints have a lot of holes to fill, and with their salary cap position, I think they would love to get extra draft capital. So maybe there. I think the Panthers, though, I think they've actually fallen in love with somebody there, and I think that person is Jalen Walker, edge out of Georgia. I think they get a dynamite pass rusher that they can put on that defensive not line there, but uh, who was it? Was it Burns who went to the Giants?
Yep.
Am I remembering that correctly? Okay,
Mhm.
this is a Burns replacement. They get Jalen Walker. They get. I know it's the second edge guy off the board, but I mean, if Abdul Carter wasn't in this draft, this guy would be, a top 5 pick. They get him at 8 there. I have Panthers picking up Carter
I like that. I like that. And this puts you the Saints
or Walker.
kind of
Sorry,
in a
not
spot
Carter.
here where, yep, yep, Jalen Walker, they're from Georgia. So Saints are in a weird spot here. I think you're right. I don't think they go Ashton Genty. I think they have Kamara there. He is aging, but I don't think you look to replace him. I think the Saints would look to trade back.
Okay.
They have hole. They have a lot of holes to fill. I'm looking at the Cowboys here to get ahead of the Bears. That's what I'm looking at, that trade possibility. I think the Cowboys need a running back. I'm not sure. It's number 12, so it's your pick. I don't know how you feel about the Saints moving back to 12 and the Cowboys moving up and getting Genty. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, with Jerry Jones, does he does he does he see like the Ezekiel Elliott replacement as the big priority, or does he see guard as a priority because of Zach Martin retiring? Does he see like, hey, I've got Micah Parsons like talking quite a lot to the media? Like maybe he looks edge there. Like I feel like while Jerry Jones would probably like Ashton Genty here, I don't think he's going to trade up. And I only say that because I think they have a couple other things that he's probably looking at to where he's going to go, when it comes to the 12th pick, he's going to go best available player at a couple positions. Maybe if Genty's there, maybe he takes Genty. Maybe if Genty's gone, he looks at guard or edge, or as
Mhm.
like a wild card, maybe receiver. I know CD Lamb has caused a stir out there, so maybe Jerry gets a little gun shy as far as a trade goes, and he just takes
Mhm.
maybe he has a few positions in mind. So I don't know if he would trade here.
Okay, that's fair. I think the Saints. That was a team I was looking at to trade it. So the Saints here, I think it's too early for a quarterback. Um, with only Jackson Dart here left as a top quarterback, I think it's too
Yeah,
early for that. I think if Shadur falls here, that could be a landing spot.
yeah,
Um,
I've seen that a
Derek
lot.
Carr's contract, he's there, and then he can move. They can move his deal next year, not be totally debilitating. So they could go offense. I don't think any of the guards here on the board are really the top 10 level. They need a guard. I don't think they go there. I think corner is a possibility. They did trade Marshawn Lattimore last year.
Yeah,
At the corner position currently, they have Kool Aid McKinstry they drafted last year. Then Isaac Yeadom as your other corner. You have Alontae Taylor, who relays your nickel. So I think there's definitely you can upgrade that quite a bit. I think Will Johnson can be that guy. I think that there has been speculation again with the arms and how he fits in, but I think he's the best corner on the board. Um, I think you look at that defense and kind of help bolster that. The offense, I I think they have. I mean, they have. You can get a wide receiver a little later in the draft to kind of fill that spot. Offensive line, you got Talisi Fuaga last year. You have some talent there on the offensive line. So I think I'm going to stick with corner and then go with Will Johnson from Michigan as that corner spot.
I think that's a really good pick. I think that's a really good pick. Okay, so looking at
So
the
your
board,
second favorite team, the Bears, you get to control.
I do. So, I know a lot of it. I think that the Chicago Bears, the draft, obviously with them having the 10th overall pick, there's a lot of different ways they could go. I've seen a lot of people say that they go with Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle out of Texas. I don't think the Bears go that route just because of how much they already spent in free agency on their offensive line. I personally think the Bears are, especially with Ben Johnson as the guy running the show there, they're looking at that team and they're like, what can we do to make our number one overall pick even more explosive and even more dynamic in his second year. And I think they look at their wide receivers, they look at their tight ends, and they're like, you know what? We're actually good in these two categories. You know where we could really shine if we have some sort of a Jahmyr Gibbs kind of a lightning bolt in the backfield. And I think that the Bears are looking at the board right now, and Ben Johnson is looking at a particular running back out of Boise State and saying, you know what? I'll figure out how good he is catching out of the backfield, but he's going to give me what I need to create just like a workhorse in the backfield and then maybe pair him with someone else, whether it's on the roster or not on the roster yet, but maybe do like a 1-2 punch like you had with Gibbs and Montgomery. But you got to get either Sonic or Knuckles before you can actually create a tandem. And I think that Ashton Genty right here, 10th overall to the Bears, gives Ben Johnson the perfect weapon to kind of help the offense as a whole and then help Caleb Williams so it's not all on his shoulders. Um, I think that Ashton Genty to the Bears here just makes way too much sense. And I think everybody in Chicago is doing cartwheels if this pick is made. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. And you have that receiving back in DeAndre Swift as well, who can help you with those, out of the backfield catches. So you have that good duo of running backs that we see so much in the NFL now. So yeah, I like that kind of more traditional running back. I think that makes a lot of sense for that pick. So I think the Bears fans would be ecstatic. We built the offensive line, and now you get some weapons to help really maximize offensive line with that. I think they're ecstatic. They won the car. Just like Vrabel broke his leg. I think the Bears break the leg again to get the Genty card up there. Next for the 49ers. I think the 49ers is a tough one. They lost a lot of people this offseason. They traded or got rid of a lot of major pieces here on offense and defense. So there's a lot of holes where they can go. Obviously, lost to Funga. They lost Greenlaw, both to the Broncos. They got rid of Debo Samuel. So a lot of different places they can go. I
Yeah.
don't think that Shanahan's going to take a position player super high here. I think he trusts his system and thinks he can find some late in the draft. So I think they go with more pure talent. I think they go on that defensive side and start filling some of those holes that they lost in free agency. I really like
Mhm.
the linebacker Jalen Walker from Georgia to go here. Obviously he's gone in this situation of the Panthers, so I think they go on that D tackle position here and kind of bolster the D line because they lost what Hargrave's gone now, and so their D tackles are Jordan Elliott and Evan Anderson. I don't think you want to go in the season with those two guys as your starting two guys on the D line. You have some pass rushers still with Nick Bosa and Yetur Gross-Mata. Not the most prolific with Mata, but it's definitely a name there. D tackle, they can fill it in. So I think Derek Harmon, Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant, Tyreek Williams, all great options here. It may seem a little bit early, but I think it's a position need. They need to fill that up. They need to stop those guys from ran all over. So I'm going to give them Derek Harmon. I think he's more of that position of need they can go with there. So Derek Harmon from Oregon would be the pick for the 49ers.
Okay. Mr. Harmon. So do you, and let me just take a look at some of these notes here. I don't hate the pick. I think that would help the 49ers, yes. Um, you said that Shanahan believes in his system. You think they go defensive tackle as opposed to like linebacker or as opposed to safety? I thought you were going to go safety there because of them losing their boy, Palomalu Light.
Hufunga. Yeah, I just think you can find some safeties. Little either way, it'd be great to go there. You could go with more of a traditional safety, like Starks, or go that kind of in the box guy like Nick Amaware. But I think you need a losing Hargrave in the middle of that defense is really going to hurt them, and they just don't
Okay.
have names there. You have some names at safety. Currently looking at the depth chart that I think you could go in the season and be okay with. Um, but I just think you need. There's nobody on the D line, and I really want to go off ball linebacker. As I think the biggest need, but the guy's gone there. So I think D tackle kind of without that bolstering 4-3 defense, you need gotta get some pressure at the middle.
Okay.
Um, but if they want to go where they're going to go, I think you got to fill a spot.
Well, that takes me to the Dallas Cowboys, and according to mock draft database, which are you familiar with mockdraftdatabase.com?
I am not.
So mockdraftdatabase.com, what they do is they compile across the internet more or less all the mock drafts that are out there, and they compile everything on there, so you can see kind of like side by side all the mock drafts from a lot of the main sites and like where they think everything's heading. And they have this thing where they actually will project as far as probability goes based on all the mock drafts out there. They compile like who's most likely to go to this team, just as far as like what the mock drafts are, right? And this has been
Mhm.
someone that, as far as the Cowboys, it's Jerry Jones running the team. I think you and I can both agree that Jerry Jones, uh, being a GM, really isn't his best quality. And I think that he makes some decisions that are good, and he makes a lot that aren't as good. And I think that there's been a huge rise in this guy going number 12 to the Cowboys. I don't necessarily see it as the best pick for them, but knowing Jerry Jones is kind of sporadic with his picks, we're actually going to go try to go into the inside the mind of Jerry Jones, and we're actually going to, even though they just extended CeeDee Lamb, they're going to go offense, they're going to go wide receiver, and they are going to get McMillan from Arizona right here, number 12th overall to the Cowboys. And I mean, on paper, it gives Dak yet another receiving threat. It's going to have CeeDee Lamb be that much more open. I think that it's exciting. This is something that you and I and Madden would love to play around with. I think the Cowboys have other needs at other places. So I don't know if I would necessarily go wide receiver here with the 12th overall pick. But I think in this scenario with Ashton Genty already off the board, I know you and I have seen him go to the Raiders on a lot of mock drafts out there. Obviously, he's going to the Bears and ours, but I just feel like Jerry Jones just kind of falls in love with the talent that is McMillan, and he just goes wide receiver. And he says like, "Hey, I gotta give Dak as many weapons as possible. This will make CeeDee's life better." They go McMillan here.
Yeah, it seems like a very Cowboys pick, so it's not shocking on there. Give him a big. I mean, he's a McMillan's 6'4", 230. He's a big guy.
Yeah,
My last mock draft, I had him going to the Raiders. Get Pete Carroll, the DK Metcalf replacement there. So I think he falls here. I think the talent warrants a top 12 pick. So I'm very much okay with the Cowboys guy McMillan. It seems weird with CeeDee Lamb, but I think you need more than one receiver in this league. You see the Buccaneers with two receivers and stuff like that. I think you
yeah,
can get away with that. So moving on to the Dolphins here. I like this. I've been on this pick for a little while. I'm not going to change it. I think he's a great talent. I think he's undervalued in most mock draft ratings. They lost Javon Holland this offseason. I think they look for a replacement for him, and they go to that safety position. They got Malachi Starks.
yeah,
I think he's a dynamic player who can make a bunch of big plays and really help that secondary out. And he just feels like it just seems like a logical pick for me. So I can't change my mind on that. So Malachi Starks to the
yeah,
Dolphins here at 13.
yeah. I love that pick too. I see nothing wrong with that. If I was picking for the Dolphins, I think that's who I would select here as well.
Hmm.
All right, takes me to the Colts. The worst kept secret out there is that they need a tight end, and Tyler Warren is dynamic. I think that there is potential for teams to potentially move up here. It just depends on what the Colts think they need. Maybe they think they need to go a little bit of defense here. Maybe they surprise everybody and they get another first round quarterback, which they're not going to do. But just the Colts seem like everybody knows they're going one position, but they do have other needs. I think they have needs on their offensive line. I think they could look, as well at their division. They can say, like, look, we're going up against a division where the last two division winners have only won 10 games. You have the Titans that are going to be hitting the reset button, the Jaguars, who knows what they're going to be like with their new head coach. Maybe it's, boom or bust kind of thing for Trevor Lawrence out there in Jacksonville. They could go a lot of different ways because they probably don't think they're that far off. They seem to always be in the mix at the end of the year and just fall short. But they're not going to overthink it, and they're going to run to the podium. They're going to take tight end Tyler Warren out of Penn State here and just give, whether it's Anthony Richardson or whoever else, they're going to give, like Jaden Daniels last year with Washington, he had Zach Ertz, and he was able to use that as a security blanket to where when he needed help, he had that guy in the middle of the field to throw to. I think Tyler Warren to the Colts makes too much sense for it not to happen. They're not going to overthink it. They're just going to give Richardson or whoever else somebody reliable over the middle that can be that security blanket.
No, I like it. Makes a lot. I think there's no surprise the Colts won tight end. I think they wanted to go tight end last year with Brock Bowers, but he went earlier than most teams thought he was going to go. So I think this year they get the tight end they're looking for there. The Falcons are interesting. They have a lot of holes. Young quarterback with Michael Pitt, which was a surprise in the draft last year. They have Bijan there, running backs. They have some weapons on the offense. And their defense is very respectable. I think they have some good players there, so really they could go BPA on where they want to go. Being a 3-4 defense that they have, and the outside linebackers Leonard Floyd and Arnold Ebiketie. I'm not sure if you replace them, but they did lose Grady Jarrett this offseason. And I think you could definitely use some more help on that D line. And I'm going to give them another D tackle. This is a good D tackle class. So I think if you need one, you draft them here. Um, and you keep building that D line because there's definitely a drop off in those first like 5-6 guys. The next tier, it's deep at all general, but I think you want that top tier guy. You go there. I'm looking at Walter Nolan for the Atlanta Falcons at D tackle.
Okay. Do you think he's being drafted a little high?
Probably, but I think it's a position of need. I think there's a big. I think with Derek Harmon going earlier, there's gonna be a run of those D tackles. I think Harmon kind of started it, and so I think with the run of it, I think Walter Nolan. There's a couple. I mean, Kenneth Grant's still there, and Tyreek Williams kind of a fringe. I view Tyreek Williams as kind of a fringe first round guy. So I think you get the guy you need for that position. I like off ball linebacker here, but I don't really see a guy. Jahad Campbell could be the pick, but I like the D tackle kind of replace Grady Jarrett. Who can play up down that 3-4 off defensive line.
Okay. Which obviously leads us to the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals, I feel like they could do kind of anything here and it wouldn't be surprising. I know they need help on defense, whether it's edge, defensive tackle, linebacker. But on offense, I feel like they maybe could be getting more out of that side of the ball, especially in the division they're in. The 49ers are going through a little bit of a soft reboot. The Seahawks are going younger and kind of like reshuffling the deck there. The Rams are the only team that seem to be mostly intact, but even them with an aging quarterback, they just got rid of Cooper Kupp. I feel like the division's kind of up for grabs a little bit. And I think what the Cardinals do with their coach being Gannon, who was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, I think that he looks at his defense and he says, okay, you know what? I think I can give Kyler Murray I can give him some help by being a dominant defense to where we give our guy shorter fields, right? I know that a very popular pick for the Cardinals to take here is Matthew Golden out of Texas, the wide receiver. I think that with them taking Marvin Harrison and them just re-signing Trey McBride to that great tight end deal, I actually think they go maybe a little bit more offense later in the draft. I think they actually decide you know, looking at the board and how it's fallen, you've got some good talent in the secondary still just sitting there, even with Starks gone to the Dolphins. But I think they look at edge here, and I think they actually surprise a little bit. I don't think a lot of people have him going there. I think it's more the Falcons didn't take edge last year. I thought you were going to go with edge. I was surprised that you took a defensive tackle. So I think the Cardinals are actually going to take Mikael Williams, edge out of Georgia, here with this pick and give Gannon a weapon that they can use there, to try to give Kyler Murray and that offense some shorter fields, and see if they can do a little bit better there. I don't think giving Kyler Murray more talent on offense is really the answer. I think it's putting the offense in a better position to succeed, would be the better route here. And with a defensive minded coach, I think they go edge here.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Go defense on that side. They re-sign, like I said, Trey McBride. They have Marvin Harrison. They have some decent pieces in their wide receiving core with Zay Jones, Michael
Yep.
Wilson, some decent names and things like that. So I think going on the defense side makes a lot of sense. I think edge is definitely a position they could go. They don't have a whole lot of talent there. On outside linebacker and Josh Sweat, which is a big pick. They got Baron Browning as other 3-4 outside linebackers. But I think adding more talent there, I totally agree with that. That'd definitely be a spot to go. I think I think D tackle, I think they prefer, but I think edge being there makes a lot of sense. Um, with the Bengals here, I think the Bengals also looking the same. The D line, with Chris Hubbard retiring, Trey Hendrickson's not happy. I think you need to
Yep.
find some talent there. I don't think you already spend enough money on offense. You got to spend money on defense. And so I think they look at these edge rushers here and see what's
Yep.
left with Mike Green, Shamir Stewart. I think Shamir Stewart, some teams are going to love him, some teams aren't going to love him. I think the Bengals do like him. I worry about his production. I think he only had a sack and a half last 2 or 3 years. That worries me, but I think he has the raw talent to be something special, and I think that the Bengals are going to take the upside and grab Shamir Stewart from Texas A&M at this spot.
I could see that. With everything that they went through, I said in my solo mock draft video that obviously the Bengals put all their money on the offensive side of the ball. They have a bunch of traffic cones on the defensive side of the ball. They just hope that they can outscore everybody 49-48 to win.
Mhm.
I think they need help on the defensive side, and you have to go young there. They went free agents or retaining free agents on the offensive side, so drafting defense makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Which takes us to Seattle. And the Seahawks with Sam Darnold there, they're going to be wanting to protect their investment. I think they could go guard. I know a lot of mock drafts have them going with Zabel out of North Dakota State, but we're not doing that because I feel like the Seahawks are surprised that Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas is still on the board. I know that they just lost DK Metcalf when they traded him. I know they could go Golden here, maybe Colston Loveland here, even though they have their tight end there that used to be a Bronco, obviously. I just feel like Kelvin Banks. The Seahawks did one thing, right? They didn't trade, but they went out and they got, we talked about this. The offensive coordinator was with the San Francisco 49ers when Sam Darnold was there. Obviously,
Mhm.
they like him. They went out, they signed him to that big deal. They want him to be their quarterback. But they also saw last year that the Rams and the Lions ate him for dinner when they played. And what was it, like 9 sacks in the wild card round when the Vikings and the Rams played?
Mhm.
So I think what the Seahawks do is instead of going guard, I think they're shocked that Kelvin Banks Jr. is still there. I think they go guard later in the draft and they take the big offensive tackle out of Texas here.
Yeah, I think the value of him still being there is too high to pass up.
Yeah.
For a team that needs offensive linemen in general, I think they want a guard, but I think Kelvin Banks is too good of a talent to pass up there. So I like that pick a lot for them. The Buccaneers, they could go with a couple different spots. I think they're definitely looking at defense side of the ball. I think with Baker, they hit on the running back last year. They have a lot of talent on offense. So I think defense is the way to go. I've been high on this pick for a while. I think they look for a linebacker. They still have their aging veteran there in the middle of the line. But I think look for a someone to kind of help. I think when they had Devin White there, I think they're much more formidable defense. He's kind of regressed and not no longer with the team. But I think look for a replacement there. I think Jihad Campbell is that guy who can kind of do a lot of different things on the defense. Can play off ball, can blitz a little bit as well, can bring some that dynamic challenges to the defense. So Jihad Campbell from Alabama goes to Tampa Bay. And it gives you with your favorite team. I think I know you're going, but talk me through it.
So the Denver Broncos. I know I haven't done a off-season recap video yet, but they were very active in free agency this year, right? I think what they did in free agency was they went out and they took care of every single need so that when they go into the draft, they could go best player available. They obviously have Evan Ingram. A lot of people think that he could be the Joker in Sean Payton's offense. They obviously went up and they shored the middle of their defense, which for anybody keeping score at home, the Denver Broncos last season had more sacks than the 2015 Super Bowl winning defense had with Von Miller and all of those guys, right?
In the
So,
league.
yes. So, with them getting Greenlaw there to be a middle line, like that just, I couldn't believe it. I think you and I even talked way back in our very first podcast, Joel. I said that a pipe dream was getting Greenlaw, and I didn't spend more than half a sentence talking about it because I didn't think it was possible, and they got him. So, Broncos could go a lot of different directions. They'll have a lot of different needs, right? I know that they need a running back. Their lead back last year, Javonte Williams, is now a Dallas Cowboy. So I've seen a lot of people going with Hampton out of North Carolina here. They also haven't had a tight end since Julius Thomas departed after the 2014 season. And I know Colson Loveland's just sitting there. I know the owners have a lot of ties to Michigan and the Wolverines as a school. So, they could look at Colson Loveland here and say, hey, this is the guy. You could also look at Golden and say, hey, this wide receiver out of Texas, let's pair him on the field with Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims and just give Bo Nix another weapon, right? I think that one thing they look at here is I think they ponder the corner Barron out of Texas. The reason that I think that this pick is going to be one of those picks that it's not like the pick is in, it's already ran in. I think it's actually going to go down to the wire because I think that George Payton, the GM for Denver, he hit on Pat Surtain, right? He was the defensive player of the year last year. He's an all-pro. And when he was hurt, the defense took a little bit of a step back. Their second corner, Riley Moss, when he was hurt, the defense took a major step back. It was your old buddy Levi Wallace who got torched by Jerry Jeudy on Monday Night Football for over 200 yards. So I think that there's a lot of talk here on whether the Broncos go with a corner here to shore up that side of the ball. But it's Sean Payton whose whole mission in life has become, let me prove that my Bo Nix pick was right. And I think the defense as constructed with everybody healthy, I don't think you need too much depth at corners because of the guys you have on the outside and the safety upgrade that you just did. I don't think they go defense here. I think they go offense. And on offense, in my opinion, you have three positions that the Broncos need. And I know I'm kind of going on this for a while, but I know you're up next with the Steelers, and I know you have a lot of thoughts there. Is it going to be running back, wide receiver, or tight end? I feel like the Broncos, the one thing they're not going to do, and I know this goes against the grain, I don't think they go running back in the first round. The reason is that Sean Payton did not run the ball last year with a rookie quarterback. Why would he spend a first round draft pick on a position that he proved he won't use that much? Now, it could be argued that Sean Payton felt like he didn't have an Alvin Kamara-esque kind of guy on the roster, so why use these guys that aren't fitting what he wants? But I feel like with the other Payton, George Payton, the GM, he was in Minnesota when they drafted Dalvin Cook in the second round. I think it's actually day 2 where the Broncos snag the running back that Sean Payton wants. I think they go skill position here. And I think with the offense, while they could go Colston Loveland, which they need tight ends, I think that Sean Payton was very high on Evan Ingram. I think they're thrilled that they got Evan Ingram. I think that Sean Payton isn't completely happy with how his wide receiver room is. I know that they're talking about extending Cortland Sutton, but I think they go young here. And I think they go ahead and they draft Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas, because they thought he was going to be gone by now, and he's not. He's just sitting there at 20. And now you get Bo Nix, yet another wide receiver that you can pair with Sutton, maybe Marvin Mims. I think Marvin Mims stays, but I think Troy Franklin last year, he frustrated Sean Payton and the coaching staff to no end, and he was Bo Nix's running mate at Oregon. So I know that they want to upgrade there. I think if they I know they love Sutton, but I just feel like Sean Payton isn't satisfied with the wide receiver room, right? They got rid of Josh Reynolds in the middle of the year. They got rid of Tim Patrick right before the season started. I think he's gotten rid of the guys he doesn't want on his team, but he still hasn't finished adding to that wide receiver room. So I think they go wide receiver here, and they surprisingly pass on Colson Loveland and a running back.
Yeah, I think that with the depth of running back class, I think you can wait to the second round and make a move and get some guys. I mean, in this mock draft, you still have all the besides Genti, all the guys are still there, and there's still a lot
Right.
of guys. You have like a Damian Martinez, Ollie Gordon, later Dylan Sampson, later in third, fourth round that are going to be there. They can get so getting a top tier wide receiver. I don't think there's as many wide receivers in this class that can make difference makers later in the draft. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Give him another weapon there. I completely agree. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then Evan Ingram, it kind of closed the door in the tight end. Not going to pay a guy and then draft a backup in the same
Well,
offseason.
and
Seems kind of
and
weird.
And the other thing is Sean Payton is kind of notorious for not playing rookies as much as he could if they're not named Bo Nix. It's usually that second year. And with them having Evan Ingram, yes, they could go Loveland, but I feel like he was very unsatisfied with some of the depth they had at wide receiver. Vele was fantastic, but I think he's 27 or 28 this year. I can't recall off the top of my head, but he was one of those like older rookies that stayed in college for a while. So I think he's looking at that wide receiver room like Cortland Sutton's getting up there. Marvin Mims is great, but he's kind of like using Marvin Mims in a lot of different ways. He just wants a bona fide, like, you go to that side of the field, you're that receiver. And I think that pairing Golden with Sutton and Mims, and then you got Vele, I think it kind of takes care of the Troy Franklin problem, which Sean Payton seemed to have. And I think
Mhm.
Evan Ingram, after he signed with the Broncos, he actually tweeted out a GIF of from The Dark Knight when Heath Ledger rolls down the window of the police car and he's just driving as fast as he can with his hair flowing in the wind. So I think that was his way of saying, hey guys, Sean Payton and the Broncos wanted me to be the Jimmy Graham Joker role for Bo Nix. So I don't think they go tight end with the first round. I think they go receiver. But which leads us to the
So,
Steelers. Joel, your team.
and I have a lot to say about Steelers as well. I'll try to keep it condensed here a little bit. 'Cause I've talked a lot about it in my other mock drafts as well. There's a lot of positions they can go here. I think we have to make a huge assumption that Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers. I think that's the case.
Mhm.
They don't go quarterback in the first round. I think they are definitely looking at quarterback in the third round. They really like Quinn Ewers a lot. He was very impressive. They really like Tyler Shuck. Look, these are later third round guys. These are guys they brought in, talked to quite a bit. I think they definitely look at the mid rounds. I think ultimately their goal is to stock up on picks and draft one next year in the first round. So they sign Aaron Rodgers. They don't go quarterback there to kind of prepare for next year. Getting a mid round quarterback makes more sense to them than what their goal are. So I think
Okay.
that's off the plate, assuming Aaron Rodgers signs. If that doesn't happen, that can change everything. Um, but with this hit Aaron Rodgers on the team, there's a lot of positions they can go with here. I think D line is a huge need. They let go of Larry Ogunjobi. They brought in a lot of veterans, but no one really to kind of fill that spot. So you have Cam Hayward, who's aging. He's 35. You got to replace him soon. You have Colonel Ben kind of playing out of position, playing that nose tackle. Really, see more of an end in the 3-4. He gets too much penetration up the middle to be that D tackle, really eating up blocks. So I think like a D tackle makes a lot of sense here. I've been harping on that quite a bit, and I may come back to that. I think wide receiver could be a huge pick. I don't think Pickens starts the season with the Steelers. I think he's going to get traded. I don't think he's going to show up at training camp. He's going to be a problem wide receiver. So I think they look to move Pickens. So I think getting a Mecca Buka here would be big. I know they're high on Matthew Golden. So the fact that he's gone kind of maybe makes them pivot a little bit more off that. They have a very young offensive line, but I think with the way the board fell, I think they want to go tackle. But I think with the positions here, there's not really a tackle they view as a top tier guy. So they move away from that. Corner, you mentioned Jahad Barron for the Broncos. I think that's definitely someone the Seals look at as well because he can play that nickel. He can also play kind of safety. He can kind of play all on the field, which is very attracts Steelers quite a bit. But I can't. And most of the mock drafts, this has been the guy that's fallen to them. I don't think I'm going to deviate from it. 'Cause I think if he's there, they're going to have to go with him, and that's going to be defensive tackle Kenneth Grant. I think that he's too good. I think they look at running back as well, but the guys they're bringing in are later round guys. I think they look at there's a lot of interest in Damian Martinez later on and Dylan Sampson. A lot of hype around those guys in the Steelers franchise. So I don't think they go, even though Martin Hampton's still there. I think they continue to build a defense and they go with Kenneth Grant at D
Hmm.
tackle. And he can play on the inside nose tackle or his more natural position will be in the end. But I think it gives a lot of flexibility and be that replacement for Cam Hayward in a year or two. Then you have Grant and Benton there long term solidifying that defense because without that strong D line, 3-4 falls apart. So I think I go Kenneth Grant D tackle from Michigan.
You know what? I'll say this. On playing devil's advocate, if Aaron Rodgers is not the Steelers quarterback, as far as mock draft database goes, there is a 30% probability that it's a Jackson Dart Steelers first round draft pick there. So I could see it going that way if they didn't have Aaron Rodgers. However, with them having Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers no defense. I think that it's a little high for that defensive tackle, but again, I feel like they're able to take people and mold them into all pros on that side of the ball. So I think
Yeah,
it's a good pick. I think it helps, especially in that division. The one thing you got to do is you got to get after the quarterback, or you have to stop the run. Derrick Henry looked fantastic this last year. I don't think he's going to be slowing down. I think Joe Mixon in Cincinnati looks phenomenal. I know Nick Chubb got hurt again, but I mean, you need to be able to slow down the offenses in the AFC North because it's always like a cage match with these guys every time they face each other. So shoring up that side of the ball even better, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I think the perfect situation here for Pittsburgh is to trade back and get Kenneth Grant a little bit later and get
Yeah.
like a second round or another third round pick is really what they want to do. But if there's not anyone I see that like a team's jumping up to grab that they need to move up for at this where the draft fell. But I think they definitely look back to move back to the mid to late 20s and get another third round pick and then draft if Kenneth Grant. So there's a lot of needs they have, but I think moving
Yeah.
back would be the ideal situation. But it didn't really come to the situation that way, so they take the guy at Kent Grant at 21.
That leads us to the Chargers. I'll make this one quick. I think Jim Harbaugh, last time I checked, he was very successful with Michigan. Last time I checked, the Broncos surprised by not taking the Michigan tight end, Colston Loveland. Last time I checked, Justin Herbert would love to have a bona fide star as a tight end. You already have McConkey and Palmer as your wide receiving threat. You just got Najee Harris to be the running back. I think they run, not walk to the podium to select Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan here to pair with Justin Herbert and reunite him with Jim Harbaugh. I think they're over the moon thrilled that he fell all the way down to 22.
I agree. I think they kind of lack receiving options. Lama Conkey went off, but there's nobody else really catching the ball last year. They brought Mike Williams back, but he didn't do anything last year at all. So I think Colston
Yep.
Loveland being that split out tight end gives them a lot of us to kind of help with that lack of receiver depth. So I love that pick quite a bit. The Packers, I think the Packers one's pretty easy and straightforward as well. I love to see them get a weapon, but the Packers don't draft weapons in the first round. They don't draft wide receiver. They don't have tight end. They trenches and defense and things like that. I think they continue that trend. I give them. I'm gonna go cornerback with Jahad Barron. There's some Jay Alexander questions and things like that. So help build the defense a little more with Jahad Barron at corner.
I think that's a phenomenal pick. I think the fact that he fell all the way down to 23 is ridiculous. And I honestly was looking at, I know the Vikings don't necessarily need corner. I think they need corner, but they have other needs as well. If you didn't take Barron, I think the Vikings would have been foolish to pass him up. I was going to take Barron. But with Barron off the board, I think it just makes it that much easier for them. Couple different ways it could go here. They could go guard. They could try to beef up the offensive line to kind of help JJ McCarthy as he kind of comes back from his injury. But I think because of the division they're in, you've got Jared Goff, you got Jordan Love, you got Caleb Williams with Ben Johnson now. I think you got to go defense with the Vikings, and I think you got to make sure that you have a bunch of guys that can actually like get after the wide receivers and the tight ends. And I think right here they go with, I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm going to say Nicky out of South Carolina. If you want to take a crack at that, that's fine. But they go safety here and they shore up the middle of their defense.
Yeah, I love the pick. I love the player. I could see him going a lot higher than this. So the fact they
Yeah.
fell to him, I think he can be that Harrison Smith replacement down the road. I love the pick. I love the player. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. I think I'll butcher it as well.
Nicky.
Once we wanted the Texans pick.
Nicky.
So the Texans are an interesting spot. A lot of needs. But they got rid of the big off of the top guard still sitting here. I think you are going to go guard here, either Tyler Booker or Greg Zabel. Greg Zabel gives you a little more position flexibility. He can play tackle, so I think that's interesting. But I think Tyler Booker is a better player. Let me look at the depth chart though. They have Titus Howard at guard. They've got Scruggs at guard. Yeah, I'm gonna change my pick on the fly here. I'm going with Greg Zabel. I think with that the position flexibility at playing guard or tackle is be very appeasing to the Texans.
I actually like that pick a lot. So as far as we talked earlier in this draft about how the Seahawks could go that route, and ultimately I had them taking the offensive tackle because Kelvin Banks fell. But if Kelvin Banks had been taken by you earlier on in the draft, I was actually going to go Zabel to the Seahawks. So I like that pick a lot. I think the flexibility would help the Texans a lot. And CJ Stroud, like I kind of have talked to you about before, he he kind of got pulverized in the playoff game this year against the Chiefs. I think they need to make sure their guy stays upright. Which takes us to the LA Rams. So this is where it gets a little wacky. So the Rams, they were a couple plays away from actually beating the Eagles in the playoffs this year, and it could be argued that the Rams actually gave the Eagles a better fight than the Commanders or the Chiefs did, right? And so with the Rams, they could go offense here. I know they have Stafford. They could go quarterback here. I know Jackson Dart has been talked about a lot since the combine. I know that Jalen Milrow, you and I talked about this off camera, that he's been invited to the draft. Seems like there's a team that's telling him, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, your name's going to get called first round that first night. But with the team they have, like, I feel like there's other needs. And looking at the board, looking at how the board fell, I think you could argue that they have needs at corner. I don't necessarily, they do need some help in the middle of their defense as well. But again, just seeing how well they played the Eagles, I don't think their defense is actually going to be the pick here. I think they know they have Stafford for a good time, not a long time. And I see a wide receiver from Ohio State still on the board at pick 26 when I've seen him go, in the top 15 in a lot of drafts. I don't think I've ever seen him in a draft to where he's actually this late. I think Sean McVay grabs Mr. Buka from Ohio State as the Cooper Cup replacement. And I think they just try to run it back as far as what the defense goes. Maybe they get some help for like the edge and like linebacker positions later in the draft. But I think they're looking at the division and they're like, you know what? We played the Eagles really hard in a snow game in Philly and we almost won. If we had a couple different offensive plays here or there, we would have been fine. We would have been in the NFC Championship game, or I guess the divisional. No, it was the conference championship game. I'm sorry. So they would have been right there playing the Commanders, right? So I think they go Ibuka and they replace Cooper Cup right away, and they give Stafford a legitimate weapon to pair with your boy Puka.
You got Puka and a Mecca. That's a wide receiving core name duo. I'm gonna say the best name duo in the NFL if this happens.
Easily,
With
easily,
Puka Nakua and a Mecca Buka. That's a lot.
easily.
The Ravens are a tough one for a multitude of reasons. One, I don't want to see them succeed whatsoever. But also they have a really good roster. There's not a whole lot of holes where they really need positions here. So I think they look at the board and is there a guy that's fallen, dropped down quite a bit that they're like, we have to get this guy. And I think that you could look at Mike Green as that guy as edge rusher, Tyler Booker guard you could go to. Definitely both are Ravens type players. But I think they're gonna trade. And I think they're gonna trade out. I think a team's gonna trade back in. And I'm gonna have that team be the New York Giants. I think the New York Giants are going to trade back in to get a quarterback.
Oh,
Earlier in the
interesting.
draft uh they got the tackle. I think they look to bring. They don't want to wait and see what happens early on because the Browns have number one pick in the second round. They went Travis Hunter. They could look at quarterback who fall to them in the second round. I think the Giants jump ahead of them here and get a quarterback for their team.
All right.
With Jackson Dart. So the
Wow.
Giants are going to trade back in. I want to say the Browns trade back in here, but
Wow.
with it being the Ravens aren't going to trade the Browns for a quarterback. They're not going to do that.
Wow. Wow.
So
Wow. 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 Wow.
I think
Wow.
the Giants can uh, make this trade happen here.
Wow.
So the New York Giants, where are the Giants trade with the Baltimore Ravens, doing the reverse the Ravens did earlier for Lamar Jackson. The Giants trade with them to get their quarterback of the future.
Wow. All right.
I just cannot find the logos here. There we go. And we'll just give them all this stuff. Again, super realistic. And the Giants will grab the quarterback, Jackson Dart.
Wow.
How
Um,
to make this one interesting, man?
I like it. Definitely a little bit different than I thought it was going to go, but I feel like Giant's going to giant. Why not fall in love with the guy that everybody just said had a great arm? If you remember a little while ago, there was another quarterback by the name of Milton who had a great arm at the combine, and he's done nothing in the NFL. So we'll see with Jackson Dart. I could be wrong. It seems like another guy who, hey, when he's in shorts and throwing against air, his arm looks great. But a lot of guys' arms look great when you're doing that. So
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of Jackson Dart. The more I watch of him, he reminds me more of Zach Wilson. The more I watch of him, but I think the Giants want a quarterback. I think the hype around him is there to be a first round pick. I think
yeah.
the Giants will follow them. And being a later round pick, they get the tackle they need up front, and then they get the quarterback later on. I like that kind of combination for him. Like I said, I see the Browns could do this as well, but I don't know what trade partner for the Browns to do that with. I think the Ravens can move back. It kind of hurt the Browns, but not letting the Browns get him by trading with the Giants. The Giants grab him.
All right. Well, that takes us to my pick. And believe it or not, there's actually going to be a trade here. The Lions are going to move back. They're not going to go back far, but they're going to go back enough. I'm trying to get the trade to go through. We're going to force it to go through here in a second. But here's what's going to happen. There have been a lot of drafts recently where I know the Lions are on the clock, but there have been a lot of drafts where the Buffalo Bills have decided, you know what? The Kansas City Chiefs, God bless them. They've had such a rough time. Let's let them trade up with us and draft Patrick Mahomes. And when that's not enough, they're like, you know what? We've had wide receiver issues. Let's go ahead and just give them Xavier Worthy. Let's just trade with them. Like, whatever. And the Buffalo Bills say, no more. And what they decide to do is they decide to trade up with the Detroit Lions. So they move up from 30 to 28. And they're going to take someone who has been sliding down the board. And it's someone that could have gone as high as 20 to my Denver Broncos. But what they are doing, they saw everything that Jared Goff did in Detroit with his running back core. They got Cook, I believe his name is, out there in Buffalo, and they decide, you know what, we really need to shore up the running game and like make it a good 1-2 punch. And they're going to take a page from Ben Johnson's Detroit Lions offense, and they're going to go ahead and make kind of a risky pick here, but they're going to take the running back Hampton from North Carolina to give Josh Allen that much more of a offensive weapon there out of the backfield. He can catch. I think that you could look at that as just, like an explosive move for the Bills. And I think if you have, whether it's Josh Allen or Cook or Hampton as threats in the backfield, I think that's just going to help the receivers and the tight ends that you have get open that much more. Yeah, so they decide to. I think there's also a little bit of pressure in Buffalo that they have Josh Allen, they have the reigning MVP, and they keep getting bounced in the playoffs. They don't even make it to the Super Bowl, let alone win the Super Bowl. So I think they're looking at how the board's falling right now. I think that if the Rams hadn't taken Ibuka, I think they'd be actually moving up ahead of Washington to get him. I think they just want to give their offense a little bit of life because it seems like, especially this last year when they played the Chiefs, it looked like they were seeing ghosts. I think that you give them Hampton. It's not necessarily a need. I think that every first round has a really big surprise. I think Cook had a stellar year there in Buffalo, and I just think that they look at this as like how do we just add talent to the offensive side of the ball? How can we surround our MVP with that much more, like I said, talent? So I think they kind of surprise here. They move up because the Chiefs are right behind them. I don't think that they want to risk, a dynamic player like Hampton falling to a rival. So yeah, they move up with the Lions, or they trade up with the Lions, and they take Hampton there at 28.
I think it's I like your thought process there a lot. I think if they don't, I think the Commanders could look at Hampton as well. So I think moving
Yep.
front of the Commanders would be a big pick for them. I agree. I think if a Mecca Buka was still there, they'd make the trade up and get Mecca Buka. But I think another weapon. I mean, they lost a playoff game because all they could do in offense was have Josh Allen do a QB sneak 3 times. It didn't work. Give a
Right.
big running back who can kind of bust through that line. I like it. I mean, you can compliment James Cook quite a bit, help
Yeah.
longevity of both of them. So
And
I
Cook had
like
a
the
great
move.
year.
I think
I
it makes a lot
I
of
think
sense.
Cook had a great year, but I remember seeing how the Bills played the Chiefs, and I was shocked. It's like their offense just couldn't do anything, and they just froze. And
Yeah.
I think that if you have that much of a threat, you got Shakir, you got Knox, you got enough. You have Coleman too. It's going to be his second year. You have enough on offense to
Mhm.
where you can still add there later on in the draft, and I think you'll be fine. I just feel like with the Commanders right there, with the Chiefs right there, you've got Hampton as someone dynamic that would help. And I just think that in addition, the Bills, they saw up close and personal Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. You know, give your running quarterback who has a killer arm a killer running game, and it just opens everything else up. I think they get tired of trading back and giving other offensive weapons to other rivals, and I think they finally just make a move this year.
I agree. I agree.
Speaking of the
The biggest is the
Commanders, you're on the
Commanders.
clock.
Commanders made a bunch of moves, brought in a lot of guys. Kinlaw they brought in, Laramie Tunsil being the big move, Debo Samuel, a lot of big moves here. So I'm kind of looking at what what they would want to do to kind of bolster up there. And there is still a lot of good edge rushers still on the board. I think they would love to go off ball linebacker, but there's not really one here that would kind of slot in there. 'Cause you have ageless Bobby Wagner, but it's probably only 1 year left. But I think you look at what's left on off ball linebacker, there's not really a guy that warrants that first round pick. And there's still some really good talent at edge. And I think look at edge, Mike Green here from Marshall is kind of that speed edge rusher who can kind of bring some pressure. I think it's the one position they're missing. You have Dietrich Wise, Dorrance Armstrong as your current edges. I think you can bolster that by bringing a young guy in there. And Mike Green, the fact that he fell this far, I've seen him go in the top 15 a lot of mock drafts. So the fact that he fell here to 29, I think that makes a pick right there for them. So I give them Mike Green, edge from Marshall.
I like that pick. I think that makes a ton of sense. I've seen the Commanders going edge in a lot of different drafts, so it makes sense there. Um,
Mhm.
who it also makes sense for is the Detroit Lions, who I think they've been looking at edge as well. I think it's no secret that their defense, I think that if they had remained healthy last year and didn't have their entire defense get injured, by the time the playoffs rolled around, I think like we could be talking about the Detroit Lions in the Super Bowl instead of the Eagles, just because of how talented they were all year, and that was with a defense that had been falling apart. I know they're getting Hutchinson back though, and so while I think that edge makes all the sense in the world, they've been having some issues in the secondary, both on and off the field. I think the pick here is actually going to be corner, and I think it's going to be Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky. He's been shooting up draft boards, and I know it's kind of a high pick. I know it's kind of potentially a reach, but I just feel like they need to shore up their secondary, especially in the NFC North with the quarterbacks they're going to be facing. I know Sam Darnold's
Mhm.
out, but I think JJ McCarthy with Kevin O'Connell is going to surprise a lot of people. So I actually have them taking Harrison, cornerback out of Kentucky here instead of edge. And I think that's because they are going to get Hutchinson back. And I think that they are going to get healthy across the board, but they were having some issues I forget the gentleman's name, but they were having some issues with some like off-field concerns with one of their corners. And so I just feel like that's the move to really shore up their secondary, because they know that with Hutchinson back and the guys they have on the roster already, they'll get after the quarterback fine with everybody healthy. They just need to kind of shore up the back
Mhm.
end a little bit.
Yeah, I like the player a lot. I think he will end up in the first round, so it doesn't surprise me. He was not my first mock draft, but he's moved up into that first round. That I think is a good fit for him for the Lions. I like the pick. Edge could be definitely a fill too. With the players still on the board, you have like a James Pierce still on the board. Um, but I think I like the fit Maxwell Harrison. That seems like it's a Detroit Lion type of player. Um, the Chiefs here. How does this seem to happen in the Chiefs every year? Look at the players on the board. I'm like, these guys are too good to fall to the Chiefs at 31 with the players still here. They could go a lot of different ways. They could go, tackle. They lost their tackle. They brought in Jalen Moore though, so it might be solidified there. They could go other positions. They need help on the D line. They need help in the secondary, I think, still. But I think you look at it and they look at it goes, we lost 2 Super Bowls because we just got Patrick Mahomes had no time. He was running for his life, couldn't do anything. Now, do you go guard or tackle? I think that's a debate on how you view the players and how they're on any big board. You got Josh Simmons and Josh Connerly here at tackle, and then you have Tyler Booker, who might be considered the best pure tackle. I'm sorry, pure guard on the board. Just really how you view the position. I think they bring in Jalen Moore. I think they're okay with that position. So I think they can go with the best guard on the board, and they can go with Booker as the pick there.
Yeah.
Um, as the pick. So Tyler Booker from Alabama as the pick for the Chiefs. They kind of fill that Joe Tunyon
I
role
agree.
they lost.
I agree. No, I think with what the Eagles were able to
And
do
then
without really
the
even
same thing
blitzing
kind of with the
anybody.
Eagles. How did yeah.
Well, I'm happy you asked that, Joel. I actually have a random question for you before I get to the Eagles pick. And it's actually a question about the AFC North, if you could humor me for a moment.
Hmm.
Why did Miles Garrett re-sign with Cleveland?
40 million reasons why.
Yeah, but he had a lot of money beforehand, right? Why did he re-sign with Cleveland?
I know where you're going to, but I think it's 40 million reasons why. But I think he thinks that they have a plan at quarterback. Is
Ah,
what their thought
and
is.
and we were talking about this earlier tonight, talking about making splashes and making moves. Um, could you remind me who was just invited to the draft?
Jalen Milrow.
Interesting. Okay, so here's the thing. The Cleveland Browns have the 33rd pick. They have the very first pick in the second round the next day, right? The
Hmm.
Eagles, they just won the Super Bowl. They don't have any obvious needs. They're in great shape, and I think that they're still on that Super Bowl high, to where when the Browns call on draft night, because they saw the Ravens do this with Lamar Jackson, and when the Eagles get a call and the Browns are willing to overpay for a quarterback to get the first round option, when the Eagles absolutely were not going to take a quarterback, but the Browns call and say, we'll give you the 33rd pick in the draft, and here's a kind of like miniature king's ransom to move up into the first round to get our quarterback that we feel like could be there. The Eagles, who are still a little bit hungover from the Super Bowl parade, say, sure, go ahead, send it. So we have a trade to end our mock draft tonight, and we have the Cleveland Browns trading up one spot with the Eagles so they can get Jalen Milrow, quarterback out of Alabama, to now pair with Travis Hunter, Jerry Jeudy, Njoku, and Nick Chubb. And the Browns suddenly got the best position player in the draft, and they got a quarterback with that fifth-year option, now they have an insurance plan to where Deshaun Watson's not going to play this year. They want to get out of that deal. You have Joe Flacco there to where he was with them a couple years ago to where he at least knows Stefanski's system. But now you have Jalen Milroe coming from Alabama. He's a smart kid. He walks in there. Joe Flacco's the guy. Again, he was the guy when he was with Baltimore when they drafted Lamar Jackson with the exact same pick, the 32nd pick in the draft. So he's been there, done that before. He's no stranger to this scenario. Jalen Milroe walks in as the number 2 quarterback on the depth chart. And depending on how the Brown season goes, they switch to Jalen Milroe. And they do good on the promise they made to Myles Garrett, which was, Myles, while we don't like the 2 quarterbacks at the top of this draft, we really like one guy, and we are going to make sure we get him in the first round. We will give you $40 million in a first-round quarterback draft pick so we can stop doing this Deshaun Watson nonsense. Will you please come back? And that is how our draft ends with Jalen Milroe going to the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I don't think it would cost that much to move that one pick. Probably like a third-round pick, maybe a fourth-round pick to kind of swap, and they get that fifth-year option with him. Yeah, the fact that he was invited to the draft, I think that the NFL draft does their research and talks to teams, like who's going to be drafted that first round. They don't want that, Brady Quinn slip or the long wait like they have at other times. They want to be right on that. So I think him being invited kind of pushes him up there. I think I'm not a Jalen Milroe guy. I'm not a fan of him. So as a Steelers fan, yeah, take him to the division. I'm cool with that. Have an awful time and watch him flop around. That's totally cool with me. But I think getting a quarterback option there does make sense for the Browns. I flirted with them trying to trade for Jackson Dart. I just couldn't find a trade partner in that 20 range. So I had the Giants do it instead.
And
but
I think
that.
I was just going to say, I think another reason that they do this, because they do have the very first pick in the second round. The reason they do this is because they are playing a guy twice a year in the division with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, where they did exactly this.
Yeah.
And because the Giants moved up to 27 to get Dart, I think that actually stokes the fires to say, like, nope, we're absolutely going to do this. And I don't think the Browns do this move if the Giants don't do theirs.
Yeah.
And the Giants pick screams of desperation where they got to get something. You got your tackle, and now you can have your quarterback to where, you still have Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston. Now you have Dart. I think that kind of screams New York Giants as far as how kind of sporadic they've been and a little reckless over the last couple of years. But I think when the Browns see them do that, they say, okay, it's not going to take much for us to go from the 33rd pick to the 32nd pick. We already have Joe Flacco. He knows our set. It makes too much sense for them to say, like, you know what, here we go. I don't know if the Browns are the team that told Milroe to come to the draft or not, but I think just with how the board fell tonight in our mock draft, this one made too much sense not to do it.
Yeah, I think making that one pick up to get that fifth-year option gives them a cheap fifth year, and they're going to be in contract misery for the next couple of years with the Deshaun Watson contract that's falling apart. I mean, you only doesn't come down and say this was a huge mistake when the guy's still on your team. Like, I've never seen that before. Like, it was like, this was a big mistake, and Watson's like, I'm going to come back and be better. It's like, you're not going to come back and be better. I don't think that.
But then here's what Cleveland does. I was just going to say, but here's what Cleveland does in this scenario, though. Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Milroe, both Alabama alums, they're suddenly on the same team, born and bred the same kind of way. And now you also got Travis Hunter at the very beginning of this draft. If Nick Chubb ever comes back healthy, you have Njoku. I mean, talk about a crazy offense to where suddenly you've got an offense that could actually like score some points. And you've got a healthy Browns defense with, Denzel Ward, and you've got, obviously, like we talked about, Myles Garrett. I feel like that's a team that could surprise a lot of people if they go to Milroe and you're surrounding him with that kind of talent. Because we know this about Alabama quarterbacks. They're surrounded by a hell of a wide receiver core. They usually have a ton of good running backs. Like those quarterbacks from Alabama, it's no shock why a lot of Alabama quarterbacks generally don't do well in the NFL. Obviously, that's not the case with Tua and Jalen Hurts, but I think Mac Jones is an example of someone who had great talent around him, and then he went to the NFL and he didn't have that same kind of talent, and so he kind of, stumbled out of the gate, or maybe not out of the gate, but overall in his rookie deal. So I think Jalen Milroe, he goes to a situation where it's like, got a decent offensive line, decent running back room if people get healthy, and then I have Travis Hunter and Jerry Jeudy and Njoku to throw to. What a cool situation for him to walk into and be like, yeah, I can do this. And the
Yeah.
expectations in Cleveland are to not suck. And if he can walk into that situation and be like, I played for Alabama, we were the cream of the crop in the SEC. Now I just have to come to Cleveland and just try not to be miserable. Yeah, I can do that. So I think because of the Giants move, it makes too much sense for the Browns to do as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It was a good mock draft. I think this is surprising. We had 3 or 4 trades. But overall, I mean, great mock draft. It was a good time. So we'll keep doing these mock draft, guys, until the actual day of the draft. Day of the draft will be here. We'll be reacting to the Broncos and Steelers pick and kind of watching the rest of the draft from that point. So stick around with us. We enjoy you guys staying here, watching the full 32 teams with me and Kevin. You've seen my mock drafts. You've seen Kevin mock drafts. Now we kind of brought one together. So stick around for the channel, like, subscribe, comment below where we messed up at, where were the terrible trades at. Again, the trades we made were just to get the teams where we want them to be, not the picks. So don't beat me up on the picks. I just kind of wanted to force the trade through more than anything. But let us know where we messed up at, what players we forgot about, what teams made the total wrong picks in your eyes. And we'll be back here again with more mock drafts leading up to the NFL draft next week. So, or no, sooner than that. So
Sure, yeah.
please keep us like us, keep following us, and subscribe and like the comment. Again, I'm Joel. That's Kevin. We'll catch you next time, guys.